When you look at a piece of Baroque sheet music, it can seem, well, deceptively simple. It all looks so clean, so even, so orderly. But then you put on a recording and you hear something totally different. This lilting, graceful, almost swinging rhythm that you just can't see on the page. So what's going on here? Let's dive into this little mystery and uncover the hidden code that really gives Baroque music its soul. Okay, so look at this. You see a string of eighth notes, right? All written to be exactly the same length. Now, if you played this literally, just as it's written, it would sound, well, like this. A little clunky, right? A bit robotic. But a skilled Baroque musician, they'd look at that same line of music and play it more like this. Hear that? It's not even anymore. It's long, short, long, short. So the big question is, why? What is this unwritten rule that these musicians are all following? Well, the answer to our puzzle is this kind of unwritten agreement, a secret handshake, from the 17th and 18th centuries. It's a hidden code that completely unlocks the true character of this music. And here's the name for it, notes inégales. It's just French for unequal notes. And it's a performance practice, mostly from the French Baroque, that says when you see a pair of even notes, you don't play them evenly. You play the first one a little longer and the second one a little shorter. This was so common, so understood, the composers didn't even bother writing it down. Everybody just knew. So what you see on the left, the notation, that's just a starting point. The reality is what you see on the right, the performance. Think about it like the way we talk. We don't speak like robots in a perfect even meter, right? We stretch some words and shorten others to give our speech flow and meaning. Or a great comparison is the swing in jazz music. It's a feel, a groove that isn't written down precisely. Notes inégales was the Baroque version of that human, expressive touch. So why did this swing even exist in the first place? It wasn't just to sound cool. This whole idea was deeply, deeply connected to the body and to physical movement. It all comes back to the dance floor. See, back in the Baroque era, the dance suite was one of the most popular kinds of music. The keyboardist Johann Jakob Frauberger really helped establish this four-dance structure in the 1600s. You had the German allemande, which was like a stately walk. Then the French courante, which had running and jumping steps. You had the slow, passionate Spanish sarabands, and the super lively English gigue. That swing of notes inégales was absolutely essential for giving these dances their unique character, for capturing the feeling of the lift in a jump or the grace in a step. Okay, but this leaves modern musicians with a huge problem. This was an unwritten rule from over 300 years ago. How are we supposed to know how much swing is the right amount? A little? A lot? Well, this is where things get really cool. This is where art meets science, because some researchers designed an amazing experiment to find some real answers. They started with a really clear, simple question. One professional musicians who've dedicated their lives to this play this music today. How unequal do they actually make these notes? They decided it was time to measure it. So here's the game plan they came up with. First, get the experts, 16 pro Baroque violinists and harpsichordists. Second, pick the music, 6 melodies from French gavottes, a dance where this practice is super common. Third, control the tempo. They had everyone play at 3 different speeds to see how that changed things. And fourth, the most important part, they used computers to measure the exact duration of every single note they played to figure out the ratio between the long notes and the short ones. So, after all that analysis, what did they find? What is the secret formula for Baroque swing? Well, the answer turned out to be both really simple and, at the same time, wonderfully complex. If you average every single note from every musician across all the different tempos, you get this number. The long note was, on average, 1.63 times longer than the short note. So, there it is. Simple answer. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast. Because, as you so often find in art, that simple average completely hides the most interesting part of the story. The real discovery wasn't the rule, it was the exceptions. The real story was in the variation. Now this is where it gets fascinating. Just look at the range here. One performer played with a really gentle, subtle swing, averaging about 1.3 to 2 to 1. But But another performer, they went for a much sharper, more dramatic feel, averaging almost 1.9 to 1, and everybody else was somewhere in between. It turns out there was never one single correct way to do it. It was a whole spectrum of personal expression. And it gets even more personal. Look at this. The researchers checked to see how players changed their rhythm when the tempo changed. Most players, like the one here, kind of flattened out their swing as they got faster, made it a bit more even. But then you have this other player who did the complete opposite. They made their swing more dramatic as they played faster. You have two world-class experts with totally opposite artistic instincts. How cool is that? So the ultimate takeaway is this. Notes in égal was never, ever a rigid mathematical formula. It was a language. It was a tool that let musicians pour their own personality, their own taste, their own bon goût, as the French would say, right into the music. It's not a rule you have to follow. It's a rhythmic signature unique to every single performance. And knowing this completely changes how we can listen to this music. It turns us from just passive listeners into active detectives. So the next time you put on some Bach or Couperin or any Baroque music, don't just listen to the melody. Listen deeper. Listen for that pulse, that swing, that groove. Can you hear the performer's choices? Can you hear their hidden signature?